Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so we got one day before the NBA Finals. I'm putting on this weird hat because my hairline is looking crazier than usual. I ain't about to shave it right now, so y'all just gonna deal with this funny looking hat. But hope everybody's having a fantastic day. I'm feeling good. Woke up on the right side of the bed, and want to talk a little basketball. Obviously, the NBA Finals again tomorrow. Looking at the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. You guys know that I'm gonna have videos before the game, a video before the game, of course, a video at halftime, and a video after the game as well, talking about it. But this is more so just a talk in between those videos, or before those videos, rather. So this is what we got. What I'm looking at is reeling it in as it pertains to what we just saw versus what I think we could see next, because I think a lot of people, even my very own self, is at a point where we think it's logical to believe that this series is over between the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. The Boston Celtics obviously had situations where they had circumstances fall into place where you would think, okay, if this happens, we win. If this happens, we win. If this happens, we win. And for whatever set of reasons, a lot of stuff like that just did not fall into place despite having those advantages. The rebounding total, Steph Curry not shooting well. He hadn't hit a three-point shot in this game. I would think that was the first time that he's ever done that in the playoffs, or the first time he hadn't done that in a while. I'm not sure what the record is, but it's a record that he broke for consecutive playoff games with a three-point shot. And you have all that happen, and you lose the game. You give up, I believe it was like 9 steals, just shy under 20 turnovers. I mean, you get to a point where you understand that, yes, were the Boston Celtics in a position where they were running into a fantastic defense in the Golden State Warriors, an underrated defense in the Golden State Warriors? I believe so. Very underrated. And a hell of a strategist in Steve Kerr, with a bunch of young guys and older guys who have a good balance about themselves. So the Boston Celtics are going up against it. I didn't pick the Celtics to win the series, but I did pick the Golden State Warriors to win in 7, which means that the Celtics would have to win tomorrow in order for that to happen. And this is a situation where, yes, am I telling myself I have to psych myself into believing that it's possible for the Celtics to win Game 6? In a way, I am psyching myself into believing that, because I do think that conventional wisdom tells you that Steph Curry, the trajectory that Wiggins has been playing with, the various different pieces that the Golden State Warriors can beat you with. What we've learned about the Golden State Warriors in this series is that they can beat the Celtics in a multitude of ways. They can beat them conventionally, shooting the ball. They can beat them in ways that they win normal games, winning the rebound and total and winning the interior paint situation, and knocking them off that way. Or they can beat them in unconventional ways like they did in Game 5, where maybe their third guy plays like a number one guy, despite their number one guy not playing worse than he's normally playing. Or Klay Thompson might snap into his own self and make great plays down the stretch on both sides of the floor like he's been doing down the stretch of these games and these finals. I think there's certain things that you just can't account for if you're the Boston Celtics. And I've said this, and I think it's because they don't use as much of their bench and their team as the Warriors do. The Warriors, even though it's driven me crazy, have found ways of sneaking guys into this series that otherwise probably wouldn't play in this series if they were coached by Ime Udoka. And I think the situation there is that's the difference. I think the Boston Celtics are a bit more tired. They've played more basketball in these playoffs than the Warriors. They've had tougher battles than the playoffs in these Warriors, in my opinion. And I think the Warriors are a fresher basketball club going into Game 6. Robert Williams is such an important piece to what the Celtics do. They need him to play at such a high level in order to stifle the Warriors from what it is that they want to accomplish in the paint. And of course, in Game 4, he was phenomenal, his normal, regular self, and the Celtics were unbeatable, basically. And then in Game 5, he was a little lesser, and it didn't have the same impact, and that's the point. You just need him, particularly, to continue to dominate in the paint, regardless of what the other players are doing. Marcus Smart gets it going or not. Jason Tatum's turned the ball over or not. Jaylen Brown's able to get to the line or not. The one constant that the Boston Celtics are always going to be able to hang their hat on, if he's 100% healthy, is the fact that Robert Williams, the third Time Lord, busses up all Golden State Warrior interior play. He makes it very difficult for them to do what it is that they do. So I do believe that how he's feeling and how well he's able to establish what he does will, in fact, have a great deal to do with what we see in Game 6. If he's not himself, and they're only relying on Al Horford and Grant Williams to be the interior players, I haven't seen them use Daniel Tyson a couple games, which I also think is a mistake. I think it's going to be tough for them to win. It's going to be tough for them to win. Jason Tatum's wildly inconsistent. Much has been said about him having this series in his head at this point, not feeling like he can give the team enough. I was listening to Carcino, YouTuber, speak on that, and I don't know if that's to be taken as truth or not. But what I can say is there's room to believe that there's a lot for him to overcome right now. There's reason to believe that he would be emotional about how he's played. But what I would tell him is, point Jason Tatum has been the Tatum that has won this series, the games in this series. It's point Jason Tatum. When you have more than 8 assists, you've won. And that's what I would tell him, dude. I think you're trying very hard to score the ball, which is obviously something your team needs. But I think the best way for him to contribute on the offensive end is to have the best possible, to be in tune with himself as it pertains to his shots falling or not falling early. He needs to identify if he has a night like he had through 3 quarters in Game 5 where he was hitting everything, or if he's shooting like he did in the 4th quarter of Game 5 where he couldn't hit nothing. The key to him helping his team offensively is being in tune with himself to know, okay, I have it going, or the defense is playing off me, so let me get it going, versus the defense is catering its entire system toward beating me tonight, sort of like they did towards Steph Curry in Game 5. And I need to become a passer. Now, he's been good at that. Game 1 was a perfect example of that, where he had 13 assists, even though he wasn't shooting very well, the team won. He needs to continue to use that pass as a means of getting him the victory in Game 6, because ultimately the best version of the Boston Celtics are a team with a lot of assists, and it starts with him playmaking. Marcus Smart then follows up with playmaking, and then it trickles down to other players who also make assists for one another. Al Horford's very important in that area. If I'm Al Horford, in Game 6, I'm looking to facilitate. Now, my initial thought was to say I'm looking to get this amount of assists, but I don't think that's the right way to go. I think it's more so about being intent on ball movement in Game 6, because I think what's going to end up happening to the Boston Celtics if they lose is they're going to try to do that hero ball. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart play for themselves. I must be the hero or we're going to lose. If they come in with that mentality in Game 6, the series is over. And that is my biggest fear for the Boston Celtics, is that because they haven't been in this situation before, in Game 6 of an NBA Finals with their back against the wall for the championship on their floor, this is a hell of an experience to go through. And the only way the Celtics are going to overcome what's in front of them is if they do it together. I can't stress that enough. If they have under 22 assists, it ain't going to work. They need, all of them, need to be looking for one another on every possession. Every possession, look for one another. You know what I mean? And if for some reason you get an easy bucket or something like that, of course your basketball IQ is greater than mine. Basketball players do what you do. But in my opinion, from where I'm sitting, it's ball movement, man. It's about and trust that can translate to turnovers. And we're talking about less turnovers. One may be inclined to want to pass less. But I think the turnover issue doesn't necessarily come from passing less. I personally think it comes from over dribbling and not being aware of the weak side as they close in. I've been watching the Golden State Warriors do a fantastic job of closing in from the weak side, using active hands and swiping and things of that nature. So in my mind, the solution is somewhere found in addressing that particular problem. If there's a particular way to find a solution for that, that's what the Boston Celtics need to be adjusting. Because the Golden State Warriors, since they've incorporated GP2 back into this series, what it's done is made the Golden State Warriors a significantly better defensive team. They are able to now keep up with Jaylen Brown as he dribble penetrates. That now leaves Andrew Wiggins more wiggle room to defend, and even more so, more rest to sit. You know what I mean? I saw a situation, normal substitution, where Steve Kerr had substituted GP2 for Andrew Wiggins. And in my mind, I'm realizing, that's elite offensive wing defense at all times. You have an elite defensive player on the floor at all times, and it simply was not the case when you didn't have GP2 out there. And that's what was going on at the beginning of the series. GP2 was not out there. You know what I mean? And you didn't have that extra dynamic stopping that dribble penetration for Jaylen Brown. Now that Jaylen Brown has to deal with both Wiggins and a weak side of Gary Payton II and Draymond Green's active hands and everybody else who has active hands, including Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, who obviously are good defenders themselves with active hands, now you're seeing forced turnovers. But here's the thing. More than half of the turnovers the Boston Celtics had, more than half, unforced. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Golden State Warriors had 9 steals. The Boston Celtics had 19 turnovers. That's one extra unforced turnover, meaning that a lot of the stuff the Celtics was doing wasn't directly affected by the defense taking the ball from them. Now, granted, that is a skewed stat because I can play great defense against you, not touch you, force you into making mistakes, bouncing the ball off your foot. You've seen a bunch of that, particularly with Jaylen Brown. So even though it's considered a unforced turnover, the defense was on their backside, and that's why they forced themselves into making mistakes. So that's a thing, but at the end of the day, that doesn't account for all of those turnovers that they turned over. That doesn't account for the unforced turnovers as a whole. There were a lot of things that took place that the Boston Celtics just needed to not do. Just mistakes that ultimately, I believe, come from them not being rested. I think a lot of people will say, "Oh, they had the jitters." Not as much as I think they had the fatigue. I think it was more so just being mentally tired and that making it so that your decisions aren't as sharp. More so than them dealing with the crowd of Golden State. With respect to a fantastic crowd in Oakland, for some reason, maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, but if you have to go play in Boston 50 times a year and deal with that crowd, even though they're rooting for you a lot of times, a good portion of the times they want you to play well, and if you're not, they're going to treat you like you're not family. I don't think that the Golden State Warriors crowd should be that nerve-wracking to the Boston Celtics in a Game 5. To me, doesn't seem like they should be rattled by that. I think the poor decisions, the forced turnovers had to do with the pressure of the defense of the Golden State Warriors, and of course, as I said, fatigue. Which is why I think it's important, once again, that Ime Udoka, it might be too late for this now. It's kind of too late, to be honest, but it was important that he used his bench. I wanted more Peyton Pritchard in the series. I wanted more Daniel Tyson in this series. And I wanted more, God, what's that kid's name? There's a kid on the back of their bench that's been playing well. I can't think of his name. I think it's Aaron Naismith. A little more of him. Not at no crazy capacity, but just like Steve Kerr's been using Iguodala and Bjelica. A couple seconds, get him a couple plays, sit him down. Why? Rest. Different defensive looks. See, this is another thing that I think is very important. And amazing as Ime Udoka's strategy has been, this is where the hole's been. He didn't use enough talent. He didn't use enough of his team. And because of it, now you got a good defense like the Golden State Warriors, having only needed to focus in on the players that you use. That's the problem with condensing everything and shortening your bench. You limit the things that I have to study in regards to you. In theory, of course that's in theory, because you can switch that up and play somebody I'm not expecting you to play. But the point is, if you stay true to that, I only got to worry about, you're trying to tell me you got a team, 16 players, you're only playing 8 of them. I only have to worry about those 8 players' strengths and weaknesses. That's it. That is all. And you're giving me, a Golden State Warrior team, only 8 players to study. What does that mean? More time to study those 8 players, more time to focus in on their tendencies. If you give me 12 players to study in rotation, that significantly changes what it is I have to do. That puts an extra hour and a half on my study time at night. That takes away from my sleep. Because now I know you're going to play Peyton Pritchard in a combination of maybe Grant Williams, this, that, and the third. When you play Peyton Pritchard in those lineups, now I got to think entirely different because I stretch the floor a certain way. That means I have different defensive assignments. That means I have to stretch the floor a different way, position things a different way, et cetera, et cetera. It makes it so that you are making my job harder in a multitude of ways when you use more of your bench in series like this, particularly against good defenses. Because now I have to account for all that you're throwing at me. you have more strengths in areas that I have to try to figure out, even if those players aren't that great. For example, Iguodala. Do I think he's that great of a player? No. Not now. Not at this stage in his career, of course. In the past, of course. But right now, no, I don't want him playing. But what does he bring to the table? Now he has active hands. Now I know he's a fantastic playmaker. Now I know he's capable of hitting a clutch three-point shot, even though he's somebody I don't want to play to the three-point line at all. I still have to respect the fact that as the game gets closer, if he happens to be on the floor, he becomes even more of a threat based on his clutch ability. So when you don't play Iguodala, I don't have to think about that. If you only play Jordan Poole, well, guess what? All I got to figure out is what Jordan Poole's tendencies is. He's going left all the time. Cool, that's what I'm looking at. Well, you bring Bjelica in the game, now I got to consider all the Bjelica's strengths, et cetera, et cetera. You get the point. So this is where we're at. I think the Boston Celtics, it's a little late to try to do what it is that I'm saying. You don't go to Aaron Naismith now. It's game 6. But the best thing for this team to do, in my opinion, is to get as much sleep and rest as humanly possible between now and that game. Extra sleep, extra salad, extra apples, whatever it is that you nourish your body with. If you're Grant Williams, Robert Williams, I'm going to the acupuncture tonight, whatever. Like, I'm taking this thing so very seriously as it pertains to the replenishment of my energy, because that is going to be the story. If the Boston Celtics come into game 6 sluggish, I don't even think the game's going to be close, because they've just taken such a hit psychologically that it's going to be very difficult to overcome a deficit in that game as well. So they got to get off to a fast start. They must play together. They must continue to put an emphasis on the boards. Do not think that just because you won the boards and lost the game that you could leave the boards alone now. It's a new game, and things could revert back to what we've learned in studying. Remember, game 5 was an anomaly, no different than game 1. You're not going to see the Boston Celtics win a game where Jason Tatum goes whatever the hell he did in game 1 and goes for 13 assists. That's never going to happen again. We said that at the beginning of this series. The Boston Celtics have won a game that they're not supposed to win already. So that gave them a significant advantage to start the series. Well, guess what? Well, the Golden State Warriors got that same game back in game 5. That is what has happened here. They won the game they're not supposed to win. So now we're even in that area. That is the zoom out aspect of this series. You can zoom in and say, oh my God, at the end of the world. You zoom out and you realize the Boston Celtics have won 2 games, one of which they shouldn't have won. So there's no reason for me to believe they can't necessarily win a game 6 in their own home floor. So that's one aspect of it. Now, we talked a great deal about the Boston Celtics, what they need to do. The Golden State Warriors, I know it's a long video. I don't care. I'm like that. The Golden State Warriors must not foul as much as they get in game 5. They fouled twice as much as the Boston Celtics. And to be honest with you, I thought there were a lot of fouls that were not called for the Boston Celtics. The Golden State Warriors must not allow themselves to fall in love with fouling the Celtics. The Celtics missed 10 free throws in that last game. 10 of them. That was the deficit that they lost by. Now, pointing at the Boston Celtics and saying, you didn't make those free throws is obviously something that we all are going to do. But looking at the Golden State Warriors and saying, you put them there for the amount of points that you won by. You put them at the line to cover that deficit. And they just so happen to not take advantage of the opportunity you gave them. You could have very easily lost that game. Do not be confused by the fourth quarter of Jason Tatum. He played well. A lot of people are talking about how horrible he looked in the game. That's bull. Not to my eyesight. I thought he played great through 3 quarters. And in the fourth quarter, ran out of gas. And the defense honed in on him. That's what I saw. You got to understand. As I said, they only given Steve Kerr a few players to actually study. So a guy like Jason Tatum, when he plays as poorly as he did, it's because the defense pointed their entire focus at him. I believe that the Boston Celtics pointed their entire focus at Steph Curry in Game 5, and that's why he struggled as bad as he did. It's not because he sucks. It's not because he's just lost focus or anything. No, it's because the defense said, okay, that's the guy we stop. That's what I think is going on both sides. So as these players struggle, it's a testament to the greatness of the defenses they're going against. And so it's just up to them to find ways of fluidly, if that's the way of putting it, being, what's the word? Productive in other areas. It's fluid because if I can't hit a shot, I can pass. If my passes aren't doing nothing, I ain't hitting shots, I'm crashing the boards like Wiggins. And if I can't do that, then I'm sitting in a chair and I'm putting all my energy on the defensive end. And if I can't do nothing else, then I'm flopping all over the place off of anybody and everybody who's a superstar, so that I can put myself in a position to at least be successful in other areas. Even if I'm fatigued, tired, and hurt, I can draw fouls. I can flop off people. And until the NBA does something about it, it's strategy, and it's a sound one, so long as it isn't abused. With that being said, sometimes it's abused and sometimes it hurts you. So if you find yourself falling on the floor like Marcus Smart when someone's shooting a 3-point shot and they don't call a call, that's your fault. So take it for what it's worth. And if they happen to do something different on the other end, like, I don't know, the other guy that you are being defended by happens to fly off of you when you just kind of swing your arm slightly and they call it, again, your fault. The referees are not going to take any accountability for what takes place when they're officiating flops. Sometimes they're going to call it, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just going to do whatever, literally. And so because it's the finals, you just have to find a sweet balance between what it is that you're doing in that way and standing your ground and playing strong, solid defense. Another thing that I think has hurt both of these teams in these playoffs, both of them. There's been games where I felt that both of these teams have looked to draw fouls driving at the basket, as opposed to looking to finish plays at the basket. A lot of times you go to the basket, you flail your arms because you want the foul call. I think the Golden State Warriors and the Boston Celtics in Game 6 both need to cut that out. Look to finish and connect on each and every chippy in this game. Don't trust the refs to bail you out when you're looking to connect on a layup or a dunk. If I'm them, I'm assuming the whistle will never be called when I drive the basketball, especially if I'm Jaylen Brown, especially if I'm Jason Tatum, especially if I'm Wiggins, especially if I'm one of those guys. It's not that I'm telling you what I expect is going to happen. I'm telling you what I think is smart for them to have in terms of a mentality. Expect no calls. Expect none. And if you think for 1 second that these games can't be determined by a technical foul, you're wrong. You're wrong. So before anything crazy happens, I would just tell athletes to have it in your mind already. Have that in your head already. Tell yourself what you need to say already. So when you get out there, you as poised as you need to be. A guy like Draymond Green, you can win the game or lose the game for your team, bro. I know it's the truth. You can win the game or lose the game for your team. If you find yourself having these verbal battles with these referees in Game 6 because they didn't give you this call or that call, they will do what it is that they do and react to that however they do. And sometimes that could be a disadvantage for your team. So I want, it's on both of the players on both sides. Understand the officiating in Game 6 and Game 7. I don't think it's going to be in anybody's favor. If it does lean in anybody's favor, the team that doesn't overreact to that imbalance should be able to manage their circumstances as best they can. But once you start I don't know if the word adhering is right, but once you start falling into that they're not doing it for me, you get frustrated, you go home, or this doesn't go your way is what I'm saying. The team that keeps their poise with the referees will be victorious, in my opinion. So that's what I want to say, man. It's a lot of stuff. Obviously, I'm gonna have a whole nother video tomorrow breaking down what I expect to see in that particular game. But overall, man, I'm just looking at this series and I say, man, this has been a great series. It's been unpredictable. We don't know what we're going to expect in a Game 6, but what we can say is the Boston Celtics are a tired bunch. And that's what concerns me most about them. It's just, can they find a way to overcome the mental edge that the Warriors just had on them in winning this past game? My name is BDL44. I'm going to drink some water.